Honestly, I really struggled this week with where to begin. Early in this current administration's previous term, I constantly shifted my planned sermon topic to address whatever new executive order or policy or statement came out of the White House that particular week. And if you remember, I called this the teasing the cats with the laser pointer technique, which is used to create distraction and chaos and suck the energy out of all of us. But it has real consequences because it creates a culture of fear. And over time, I realized that constantly reacting to what happened each week only contributed to allowing that culture of fear to dominate my spiritual life and the spiritual life of the congregation. Fear threatened to become the story. So I'm going to make a conscious effort not to do that again. That does not mean I will ignore what is happening in our country or our world, but I want to help us practice the spiritual tools we will need. Resilience, staying clear and grounded in our values, which center on the disciplines of love and the search for truth, and sustaining and nurturing sacred, beloved community here and beyond our walls. The story of Unitarian Universalism at its heart is a love story for this life, for this earth, and for one another, whoever and wherever we are. Ben Okri, the Nigerian writer and storyteller, reminds us that because stories are powerful, they are not innocent. They can be used to do great harm. He writes, tyrants and ideologues use stories. The state uses stories when it wants to bend our inclination towards its secret programs. Families use them to create their own myths, sometimes at the expense of other branches of the family. Stories can even be used to destroy a people by demonizing them as the other and blaming them for all the ills in the world. Sound familiar? At the same time, stories are powerful because they can heal. They can empower, inspire, unify. They can reveal truths deeper than just the facts. And they can transform us. As Okri notes, good stories incline toward life, toward raising the consciousness, a lifting of the heart. They are evolutionary. For good stories point the way upwards. This is their enigma. It is not enough to read or listen to them. We must continually meditate on them to extract their timeless wisdom, their signposts meant to guide us on a true secret path. So I'd like to have us do that with the story of Jesus and the Canaanite woman. At first reading, when you first heard it, maybe you cringed a bit. Some of us, because the Bible was used against us and continues to be used against us by white Christian nationalists. Some of us, because Jesus compares the woman to a dog, which is very demeaning, especially coming from a great spiritual teacher, and for some, the embodiment of God's love. And it seems that she accepts that, accepts the crumbs of God's love. But let's go a little deeper, get in between the lines to pull out its wisdom and its deeper truth. First, we have to keep in mind that this is an ancient story told in a different time in a different context. And it's important for us to realize that it is not just yet another story in Matthew's gospel about how Jesus healed yet another person. Instead, to me, this story is about how a woman who belongs to an enemy tribe challenges and transforms Jesus' ministry and his understanding of who he is and whom he is here to serve, whom he is called to love. Remember, Jesus was Jewish. He believed initially that he was called to teach, preach, and minister only to his own people. And then here comes this person who is on the margins in so many ways. She is a Canaanite, a descendant of the peoples that God commanded the Israelites to conquer in the time of Moses so that they could enter the promised land. She is a historic enemy. More than that, she's a woman. A woman who, out of love for her daughter, flouts the social norms, and she persists. Respectfully, but firmly. She tells Jesus he's wrong. It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs, he says. Yes, it is, she counters. Yes, it's right to heal, to have mercy, to serve, to share, whatever form God or the larger spirit of love takes. It is right, and it is good, and it is the deeper truth. And Jesus' ministry is transformed by this encounter. He doesn't directly acknowledge that. He simply says that her daughter is healed because of her faith. But after that, his ministry changes. If we look at this encounter in the context of the whole Gospel of Matthew, we see that it comes just a couple chapters before Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan, another example of an enemy tribe, to define what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. Everyone, even your enemy. The Canaanite woman shifts the story that Jesus has been telling himself about who he is and whom he is here to serve. And that shift in his story changes everything. Stories are the intermediaries between what has happened to us, the experiences we have, what we observe in the world, and the meaning we make out of them and how we weave them into our living. Which is why recognizing that stories are evolutionary, not static, not set in stone, is crucial. Because we can shift them. We can shift our stories toward what heals us, what uplifts us, what liberates us, what transforms us. We do not need to stay stuck or be held captive by them if they do us harm, or if they harm others. At some point, we have to understand that we do not need to carry a story that is unbearable. Joy Harjo reminds us. Josh and I have been watching the TV show Shrinking. I don't know if anybody has seen it, and I'm sorry, I'm about to give a spoiler. About a therapist named Jimmy, whose life was overturned when his wife was killed by a drunk driver. Believe it or not, it's a comedy. But it also has, as comedy does, has these incredibly wise and tender moments that come out of nowhere and punch you in the gut. Like when Jimmy tells his mentor and therapist, Paul, what happens when the villain of your story turns out to be just a human being who made a terrible mistake? This shift in Jimmy's story doesn't heal Jimmy's grief and pain. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't bring his wife back. But it makes him more able to bear the unbearable and turns him back towards living and away from self-destruction. And that's an important thing for Unitarian Universalists to remember, because many of us come to this faith having been hurt by previous religious experiences, particularly in the conservative Christian tradition. And now more than ever, many of us come to this faith because some existential event has happened in our lives where we feel we need spiritual care and support. In other words, people come to Unitarian Universalism carrying a story in search of healing in some way or another. And even if we did not originally walk in here with that experience, we will all experience losses and challenges when we will need this place. Here's the challenge, though. It can be easy to remain in the stories that brought us here, to stick with the stories that focus on how we've been hurt and what we have lost and who and what harmed us. I know I've done that with a couple of stories in my life over the years, and with good cause. And while sometimes I've had to draw some boundaries to keep myself physically, emotionally, and spiritually healthy, I've also worked hard to shift these stories I have told myself so that over time, they evolve into something that serves life and gratitude rather than fear or bitterness. Right now, we are in the midst of a tremendous wrestling match about the story of this country, the story of who belongs and who doesn't, who is an American and who isn't, frankly, who's fully human and who isn't, and who gets to define that. The story of what power means and how it should be wielded, and what values we should live by, and what democracy means. There's a lot at stake in this story. And the current administration is using fear, manipulation, and intimidation to enforce their story of a formerly great, read white America, now in decline, due to groups like undocumented immigrants, who they say are all criminals, and trans people, who they say threaten our children, just to name a few. A story that denies the truth of science, from healthcare to climate change, and denies the reality of the interconnectedness of the planet we live on. It's a frightening story because it's meant to be a frightening story. It's meant to inspire fear in those who disagree, while nursing the fears of those who do agree, to disempower human community and connection, and to empower divisions and resentments. Because no matter our politics right now, we all have the right to feel very afraid. There's a lot out there that is scary and threatening in our world right now. Economic insecurity, healthcare insecurity, war, terrorism, domestic and international, out of control floods and fires and storms. But while it makes sense for us to be afraid, we can choose to live a story that does not allow that fear to dominate and define us, or our neighbors, or our country. We can choose to live a story where our fears bring us together out of compassion and care. It's not easy. Fear makes us want to react quickly to make it all stop. At least that's what fear does to me. But we're going to have to be more patient, more strategic, and more courageous than that. Because we can only shift the story within our sphere of influence, ourselves, and the communities within which we live and touch others directly. But I know that this is happening on the ground elsewhere, all around the country and all around the world. And it will take time for the ripples to move out and connect, for the story to shift. I do not know how long it will take or what it will require of sacrifice and courage. I do not know how much it will cost, or how much will be lost. But I call us to remain faithful to the story of our faith as it evolves and transforms to meet the moment. That this life and this earth matter, that we have been given one another not just here, but out there, to share this life and this earth. And we are called to embody love in the search for truth, whatever we believe its source, as best we can. And we don't have to do it alone.